If you're old enough to remember 1977, the year that Saturday Night Fever was still in theaters, you got to look at Fran Drescher a full 16 years before she became famous on The Nanny. Fran played a character who goes up to Travolta at the disco and asks him to dance.
Are you as good in bed as you are on that dance floor?
And then they dance for a minute, but then he blows her off.
Oh, forget this.
And then he goes and makes history doing his famous solo dance on that lighted dance floor. You know, the one with the Bee Gees, the disco finger, and then finally the big Russian squat finale. Now, Fran says this scene, which was her first big break in movies, almost didn't happen. Travolta, apparently that day, he was in a mood. He didn't feel like shooting. So she, little Fran Drescher, 19 years old from Flushing, Queens, whose only claim to fame at that point is as runner-up for 1973's Miss New York Teenager pageant, basically told the famous TV sweat hog to get a grip and get to work, and the famous sweat hog got a grip and got to work. Call this trait what you want. You can call it grit, chutzpah, balls. Charlie Sheen called it tiger's blood. Fran Drescher's always had this. I am ecstatic to have Fran Drescher as my first guest on season 2 of The Originals. And I'm also incredibly excited because this season is kind of a merger of sorts. I'm doing this entire season in conjunction with Los Angeles Magazine, who, I know it's difficult to imagine, has never had a podcast before. So if you like how Fran sounds, and really, come on, who doesn't like how Fran Drescher sounds? You've got to pick up the May issue of Los Angeles Magazine and see how great she looks in the photographs. And if this is your first time listening to The Originals, hello, my name is Andrew Goldman. I've been an interviewer of celebrities for many years, and I found after interviewing so many of them that very few of them have that much to say. So I created The Originals to track down cultural figures who actually want to share of themselves. They want to express something. Some of them have axes to grind. Fran Drescher has a lot to say about her run-in with a famous TV executive.
I don't mind if you shove an umbrella up my ass, but when you open it, you've gone too far.
Not to mention a super controversial opinion on today's most polarizing health topic.
I don't like the idea of giving a baby 40 vaccines in their first 2-3 years of life. That's just crazy.
And she also happens to have a show on TV on NBC. It's called Indebted, and she has a very active cancer nonprofit called Cancer Schmancer. Fran Drescher, welcome to The Originals.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. That's so nice.
I'd like to start with the very beginning. You know, I found this 1981 New York Magazine article.
Oh, yes.
Which was
the
1981.
Lucy and Desi of the 80s.
So we just have to put this in context. The Nanny wasn't until 1993.
Correct.
So it was a full decade before you actually became, a household name. Let me just read the first paragraph of this story. From 1981. Fran Drescher and Peter Mark want to be the Lucy and Desi of the 1980s. They want to star in their own sitcom. They want their own production studio. They want to hire their families so their parents won't have to work anymore. They want $1 zillion. And how much chutzpah did this take? And how, I just feel like the fact that you had the story, I was thinking about it, the fact that you scored the story in New York Magazine probably predicted that you would make it. And it may have actually helped that. But who says that? And how does somebody make that come true? Just by force of will?
That was just an anomaly. Somebody knew somebody at New York Magazine. We were unique in the sense that we were high school sweethearts working in the business.
We should explain who we is.
Me and Peter Jacobson, now my gay ex-husband.
Yes, okay. Well, that's
but
important.
We were high school sweethearts.
Yes.
And then we moved out to California together. And, we had a vision to become like Lucy and Desi.
I think it's fair to say that you were virtually unknowns in 1981. You had had a couple of small roles, but you had a role that's now a small role in an iconic scene in Saturday Night Fever.
And I think I did a couple of movies more than that, maybe that distinguished me as a young up-and-coming, because I did American Hot Wax, I did Hollywood Nights,
But you scored, you and your then boy, were you married at that point? I'm trying
Yes.
You and your husband scored like 4 or 6 pages. Basically, I want to read
I know, it was quite remarkable. They were kind of just like charmed by us when we met them, and they thought this is a real New York story. We all have the capability of manifesting our destiny. You have to keep your eye on the prize and see where opportunity is knocking. And I had decided that I needed to get on the inside of the business in a big way because I really felt like I was more talented than a lot of the people I was working for. And it became a creative frustration for me. I had done a lot of pilots that were really mediocre and not well done and not well written. And I didn't really enjoy that. I thought, there are many ways for me to make money, and I don't really want to be waiting for the phone to ring. And Peter and I both didn't really think that the business understood that I was a star and not a third banana because I kind of had a funny voice and maybe I was more the nutty neighbor.
No, there is sort of a genre. Isn't there roles of like the girlfriend roles that there's some actresses
I was the hooker with the heart of gold roles.
Yeah.
I just wasn't the star. And
but you felt like you knew you were the star.
Yes, Peter and I both knew that I had what it took to be a star, but we had to show the business that.
There was a description, I don't know if it took you some time to come up with this, but I thought it was hysterical. You said you weren't exactly like sort of the white bread kind of ideal model. You were the rye bread.
Yes, exactly. I was a pretty girl with a funny voice who could do comedy. So I found that niche very early. And I think that was partially because there was a lot of that happening, particularly in television, like Laverne and Shirley and Welcome Back, Kotter, Happy Days with the Fonz. By the time, I had gotten that small part in Saturday Night Fever, and then I was doing also commercials, and it always, there were movies out like American Graffiti and Diner, and I don't remember when Footloose came out, but, it was a time where there were these roles for young people, and having a kind of urban quality was okay, like John Travolta and Henry Winkler.
It's funny, you use the word urban. Now when they talk about urban, they talk about African Americans, but back then, are you talking about Jews, sort of? Like Jews from the city?
I think people with New York accents, not middle American.
Yeah.
Laverne and Shirley, even though that supposedly took place in
Milwaukee?
Milwaukee, but they,
I was thinking about because I think that you had mentioned once that initially when you dealt with the network, they wanted Fran to be Italian. Is that what? They wanted her to be Italian, but you insisted on her being Jewish, correct?
Yes. Well, when we got green-lighted to write the pilot for The Nanny, I guess the network was already talking to major sponsors like Procter & Gamble, who said that it sounds great, we'll buy the show outright. But The Nanny has to be Italian, not Jewish.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding me.
Yeah. So
I was thinking about Jews on TV, and you mentioned Laverne and Shirley because I think maybe Laverne sort of comes off Jewish, but her name is DeFazio.
No, there were no Jews. I am the first starring role playing an openly Jewish character in the lead role in prime time since Molly Goldberg in 1948.
I was going to say the Goldbergs.
1948 to 1993. That's quite a stretch.
And then I think people have mentioned, there were supporting roles. There was Rhoda, correct? On Rhoda Morgenstern, but she was a supporting character.
She wasn't Jewish in real life.
And
that's
she was not
the
a Jewish
difference.
Yeah.
That's the difference. It was almost like gilding the lily. They didn't want to have Jews playing Jews in a starring role.
Were you shocked by this when you heard this about... Did they tell you directly that the advertisers love it? They just want you to be not Jewish?
Yes. Well, I was taken aback for sure. But, also Peter and I had to really reconcile with this because we knew this was our big break. But I do not like living with regret. And I don't want to rush into doing something to get the job. And then when it doesn't go right or it fails, I kick myself because I thought, why didn't we follow our instincts?
Yeah.
Why did we listen to them?
Right.
And I thought, I can't live with that regret. I know this character needs to be written very close to me and all the rich and wonderful characters that I grew up with.
Yeah.
And Peter and I have a brand of comedy that's rich in specificity. And not only couldn't we have written it that way, if the character were Italian, but I couldn't have performed it that way. So we kind of mustered our chutzpah and said, no, Fran Fine must be Jewish.
It's interesting going back to the 1981 article because it talks about your credits in movies that we've heard of, like Saturday Night Fever. And it talks about, I think that you might have done American Hot Wax with Jay Leno at that point. And then it talks about Peter's credits, which were somewhat more scant. He had done a couple Zit commercials, and it didn't seem like he was getting the work. Was there any movement from managers or something to be like, Peter's great, but this whole like sort of Lucy thing doesn't sort of work because you are the dominant partner in this? And
Peter found out, and I encouraged him in this direction to find his true voice. He didn't have the stomach for the rejection of being an actor. And he would get very nervous, and then he would beat himself up when he wouldn't get it. And yet I knew he was a great writer-producer. Mm-hmm. I could feel that. He knew I was a star, and I knew he was a great writer-producer, and I became his muse. At the time, CBS was a Jewish-owned family network owned by the Tisch family. Mm-hmm. And almost every top executive was also Jewish and or gay. Mm-hmm. Our guy that was developing the show, who was the first person we pitched it to, was both. And he perked up right away when Peter said, because he said, what does Mr. Sheffield do? And I said, I kind of thought maybe he'd be like a real estate mogul. And he said, that's not fun. What's fun? Yeah. And Peter said, I think he should be like a Broadway producer.
Yeah. Well, you guys did a show, an autobiographical show called Happily Divorced. And, one of the themes in the pilot and going on is, how did I not know that my husband was gay? And you just mentioned Broadway producer, and I thought, well, that sort of seems like maybe that could be an indication. I don't know.
But we were in show business.
Good point.
And we came from New York. We were actors.
Yeah.
And, look, I know him since I was 15. I was a naive young woman. Yeah. I really hadn't had a lot of experience. And I didn't go away to college. I didn't backpack through Europe. I never even went away to sleepaway camp. So, when I met Peter at 15, everything about us was shaped by the neighborhood we came from, our passion for show business, and the fact that it was a period where the metrosexual was coming into vogue in a very big way. Yeah. So for me, it was a little bit of a blur. I didn't really, and we were having a lot of sex. Yeah. So
I have to stop and admit this detail kind of floored me. So Fran was married to a gay guy for 20 years, and apparently Peter never acted out on any of these desires in that whole 20 years that they were married. So 20 years of marriage, I mean, who has sex after 20 years of marriage, let alone one where one of the partners is actually closeted? I mean, it's crazy, right? So I want to play this one clip from Happily Divorced, which ran from 2011 to 2013. And Peter, who was played by the actor John Michael Higgins, comes out to Fran, played by, Fran, while they're in bed.
You know how much I love you, right?
Oh, my God. Are you having an affair? Who is she?
No, Fran, no, I'm not having an affair. There is no other woman in my life but you.
Oh, thank God. Mwah.
It's just that I think I'm gay.
What?
I'm gay.
What? But we just had sex during Leno. How gay can you be?
I read Cancer Schmancer, in which you talk about your divorce at great length. I mean, you don't talk about, I think, his sexuality at that point. It's probably not something that you decided to do.
I didn't know then. I didn't know that. No, because we divorced not because he was gay, even though that's what we did in the series.
Oh.
I just felt suffocated by the relationship, and I had just hit a brick wall and had a very garden variety midlife crisis where I didn't know who the hell I was. Yeah. I was my parents' daughter. I was my husband's wife, and I was this big celebrity already, but not happy, not fulfilled. I had fears that I wasn't able to face. I had issues. I didn't know who I was.
You were so successful at that moment. When you divorced pretty much
Well,
at the
that's
height of your success, correct? Pretty
We
much?
separated.
Separated.
We were still doing the show, and it was very difficult because he felt very hurt and abandoned. He didn't want me to leave him. I just didn't know how to. I was suffering, and it wasn't just his fault. It was me. I didn't understand how much I was burdening myself with living from a false self and avoiding my fears. And
I mean, not to. I mean, this might be too personal, but what were you afraid of?
being alone.
Well, it's interesting to separate from somebody if your fear is being alone.
Exactly. It was like walking through fire. Plus, I wasn't used to putting my own needs above anybody else's. I got my buzz from being the good girl always and being needless always.
Well, we'd assume from like thinking of like sitcom history. I don't know much about the production of The Nanny, but you look back at like Roseanne, for instance, and I don't think anybody would say Roseanne was looking for anybody's needs. She was the star, and she was an autocrat in certain ways. But you weren't like that during The Nanny. You weren't like you had every right to be the diva. You were on a show that was, was it number one for 2 seasons?
I bent over backwards to get people jobs, to get them into the union, to give people opportunity, to open my door to people that had problems at work that normally would never have access to the star, let alone the EP. I made sure that even the craft service table had healthy food. And, I just had my hand in everything in a very nurturing way. It was more difficult when Peter and I separated. I think I might have been having a little bit of a mild breakdown. And I was going through a very challenging time, and he wasn't making my life easier.
You wrote him, and it's a very funny depiction of him. But in Happily Divorced, he's a neurotic.
That he is, but he'll be the first to admit that. Over the years, he's also gone to therapy, and he's living an authentic life now. He's no longer trying to suppress his true orientation.
He's described himself as what sounds like textbook bisexual, though. Like it was almost like 50-50 girls and boys, no? But it wasn't really like that, you think?
Well, he had never acted on anything by the time we split, so there's no 50-50. I think he was, struggling with his urges because he loved our life. He loved me. His parents were already dead. He was an only child, and I and my family was his family. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot going for us. I mean, we had a home, we had friends, we had a big career together. And we had a lot of history. We were together since we were 15.
But you showed up to work and he was at work. Did you consider firing him? Could you have fired him?
I would never. That was our baby, and we never would hurt the baby for...
But the baby could go on. Baby doesn't die if he's not there. You can still get a show on TV if he's not there and you're there, right?
I don't think so.
No, okay.
No, he was absolutely, integral to the success of that show.
Yeah. Did you feel like, I think that, you talk to a lot of people.
But it was never even a consideration.
No?
It was enough that I separated. I don't.
Was it ugly at work? Did people know?
People knew. We closed the set. We stopped the audiences.
Really?
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard.
Because it would have been obvious to audiences that there was something kind of...
No, I didn't have the strength.
I can only speak from the perspective of a man, but I think if I had had a high school girlfriend and I'd lost my virginity and then I became a big star, I would want to enjoy the sexual benefits of being incredibly desirable to basically the entire country.
Well, that wasn't a motivation at all. But once we, split, once we broke up and I was divorced, then I became a little bit of the animal let out of the zoo.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy that?
It was a real learning experience for me because I I didn't even know what my type was. I didn't know how to say, no, you're not coming home with me. No, we're not going to sleep together. I had issues with rejecting people, but I knew I had to.
You have talked recently about having kind of a Netflix and chill partner, somebody that you, I guess, consort with occasionally. I don't know if that's still the case.
Oh, yes, my friend with benefits.
Friend with benefits.
Yes.
Which doesn't sound like he's particularly clingy or has like an emotional...
No, we're a perfect little... We have a very simple and lovely friendship.
Yeah. So you laugh for me, and your laugh is, obviously an amazing laugh. But you actually, it's funny because I think your mother had once said something like... What is it? She said, "Oh, is it like you look like Brooke Shields with the voice, or something like to that effect, right?" Like basically,
my mom doesn't have the same laugh as me, but when my parents were interviewed, and of course they asked my parents whether what was it like when I was a little girl, and did I sound like that? And my mom, in a very similar speaking voice, said, "We never knew she had a funny voice."
This is no secret. Fran Drescher talks funny. Fran knows it. She embraces it. She's called her voice her moneymaker before. But could that really be her voice? Because, in other roles, she didn't always sound quite so much like what's a polite way to put this? Like a goose. She sounds like a goose. Check out 1984's Spinal Tap, how different she sounds in her famous role as the record company publicist Bobby Fleckman. In this scene, she delivers some very bad news to Spinal Tap's manager, Ian Faith, who's played by Tony Hendra.
Yes.
You can give it to me straight,
Listen, they don't like the cover. They don't like the cover.
Well, that's certainly straight.
They find it very offensive and very sexist.
Well, what exactly do you find offensive?
Ian,
what's
you
offensive about
put a greased, naked woman
Yes.
on all fours
Yes.
with a dog collar
With a dog
around her
collar.
neck and a leash.
And a leash.
And a man's arm extended out up to here, holding on to the leash and pushing a black glove in her face to sniff it. You don't find that offensive?
No,
You don't
no.
find that sexist?
This is 1982,
That's
Bobby.
right,
Come
it's
on.
1982. Get out of the 60s. We don't have this mentality anymore.
You're so great in it. But the thing that you notice about Bobby is you speak differently.
No, I don't. Not exactly. Not like that. I think that what you're picking up on is that I wasn't playing a comical character. I was playing a serious character. But when I say to them, and what about the White Album? There was nothing on that cover. Or you to have and a dog collar. I wasn't not doing my natural New York accent. And so I think maybe that's what you were picking up on. When I did the Bobby Fleckman thing, I brought it out, I brought it into my lower register and took it out of the nasal thing.
You, like me, think that Fran's voice has a split personality? All you need to do is check out the famous Wasabi clip from The Nanny.
It's like mustard, gives it a real kick.
Ooh, I love mustard. So, tell me, how's working with Marvin Hamlish?
If you ever had any doubt, Fran Drescher is a great physical comedian and quite possibly the heir to Lucille Ball. Google The Nanny, Wasabi, and watch a master at work. I'm watching it right now. Here's the setup. Fran's never been to sushi, and she's told by her lunch date that wasabi is just like mustard. So I'm sure you see this coming as actress Lauren Lane prattles on. Fran takes the entire ball of wasabi and smears it on one piece of maki. Pops the whole thing in her mouth. Her eyes bulge out of her head. She grasps onto her throat as if she's choking. She falls to the floor. One hand comes up, grasping in vain for a water glass that she can't quite reach. And then finally, she emerges, and we get the payoff.
Gee, that mustard really clears up the nasal passage.
I think this is one of those classic, shocking sitcom moments. And I kind of think of it as shocking as the moment when Ted Danson took off his toupee in that last episode of Cheers.
I wonder how long it's gonna last.
I think you mentioned that there was a moment where you went to a speech therapist or a speech coach, right?
Yes, my dear manager, who is no longer with us, said, honey, if you want to play anything more than hookers, you're going to have to learn how to speak differently. And I did try and learn how to speak in what was described as a low, slow flow. And that
Lows?
was
Is that an exercise? Low, slow, because it sounded like an exercise.
yeah, and it's a reminder of where you have to bring your voice and take it out of the nose and everything. But I didn't get any work. I lost my personality, and I think I was already too established as this young comedian with a funny voice and a pretty face.
Yeah. Did you, in reading both books, what you realize, I mean, this is kind of an intimacy that you don't read about in the memoirs of celebrities. In your first book, you document what is the most horrifying experience, and I hesitate to even bring it up. 1985, you had a horrible experience that a lot of people know about that you can talk about. It's your story to tell if you want to talk about it. But it was one of the most horrible crimes I've ever heard of in my life.
Well, it's not on the level of Manson, but I am a victim of a violent crime, and I was raped at gunpoint in my own home by a man who was recently out on parole, who I did not know. And it was a horrific experience, and my girlfriend was with me, and Peter was there, and my dog was there. And, it took me a very long time to, recover from that. But I was one of the lucky people who ended up having closure to it because he was apprehended and he was put in jail for 2 lifetimes. So, because I was not his only victim, he said he was on a rampage. He's in jail forever now.
Okay.
He will never be let out, ever.
Yeah. And then in the following book, in Cancer Schmancer, you talk about going through uterine cancer.
Yeah.
And you talk about the difficulty of, with
Getting
your
a
then boyfriend, getting the diagnosis and going through obviously the surgery, but then obviously having an intimate relationship with somebody after you've gone through this, which sounded like it was difficult. So you have gone there. I mean, you read these books and I was just sort of blown away by the amount of intimacy that you offered. And I'm sure it means a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah, for me, it was a cathartic experience to write about it. But in a way, I feel like I got famous, I got cancer, and I lived to talk about it. So I'm talking. It took me 2 years and 8 doctors to get a proper diagnosis. But by the grace of God, I was still in stage 1. And the book was a New York Times bestseller almost instantly. And I realized that the book was not the end, but just the beginning of what's to become a life mission.
The Nanny, what was it? How many episodes? 145 episodes?
Yeah,
6
something
seasons? And let me see. And the thing that was sort of surprising to me, because I don't watch a lot of TV in other countries, is how many countries have either translated or created their own version of The Nanny?
Oh, well,
Oh, here we go.
Oh, you got it?
Well, no, this is a recent story that says it's been syndicated around the world and remade in 12 countries, including Turkey, where it was called Dadi, Poland, Nia, and Argentina, La Niñera.
La niñera is the Latin or the Spanish word for the nanny. That's what it is in South America, Central America, and Mexico. And, of course, Spain. La tata is in Italian. Le nounou is French. And it was wildly successful in Russia. They did it over again. In Hong Kong, they did it over again. And, I created it. So
there's not, you have benefited in the way one should benefit if they create a show.
Yes.
You and Peter.
Peter and I, yes. We're in partnership with Sony Studios on it.
So,
and our other writing and producing couple who came into the project as our advisors and EP and showrunners, because they had the experience, we did not.
Yeah.
But we had the vision and the creation.
I hear those details and I think of the word mogul. I mean, just sort of, this is a huge property.
I honestly think that the people that just were able to renegotiate, the actors who were able to renegotiate on Friends ended up much richer than me, as were the actors that renegotiated on Big Bang Theory.
Well, why?
Why? Because, I never made anywhere close to $1 million a week. We ended before the 7-year contract. And I was victimized, I think, by the fact that we had 3 different administrations in that network over the course of the 6 years. And with each administration, we got less and less attention and worse time slots because every new president wants to put their projects into the most coveted time slots so they can benefit from bringing the network up and creating hits.
So what did they put you against? Did they sort of throw you to the
Well,
to
like
the wolves?
at one point, and now I'm on my third president. It was Les Moonves, and he wanted to put We had Monday nights was really a woman's night. It was me and Murphy Brown, and it was just a whole different vibe. And then he came in, and he wanted a lot of. He developed Everybody Loves Raymond, and he wanted, what's his name? Bill Cosby's show.
Oh.
Okay. And
Wait, so
this was his, like a new version of his show.
it sounds sort of fratty, that lineup, no? Well, I guess you wouldn't call Cosby was, I guess, sort
No,
of a
and
fan.
it was King of Queens.
Well, that's fratty.
And I coined that phrase, but
What?
they, because I was the Queen of Queens. I used that through the whole nanny. And then they wrote that thing. And, they were all good shows. But my point is that I got put into a graveyard time slot. Bill Cosby replaced my time slot on Monday night, and I got put into Wednesday night. And we ended up bringing better numbers than they had in probably like 25 years, but it was still, people weren't tuning into that time slot Wednesday night on CBS. There were other networks and shows that they were in the habit of doing, and we didn't really have any lead-in, and we never had a lead-in because we were always 8 o'clock, and we never had a lineup. So, it was almost like by appointment TV. If you want to see The Nanny and you're willing to sacrifice what you normally watch on Wednesday, then you could find it. And, it wasn't like there was DVR then or anything. So, people were watching TV as it aired for the most part.
Sure.
And,
But,
I
what's
was
interest-
resentful of that.
Yeah.
That he was turning it into a boys' club. That was his prerogative. But he wanted me to do a commercial to promote the fact that we're to watch Cosby in my old time slot.
What?
And that was just too much.
Is that even done? Say, hey, I'll miss you at Monday, but why don't you check? Did you tell him to go put it where the proverbial sun don't shine? I can't believe I said that. I sounded like 300 years old, didn't I?
I
Sorry.
said, Les, I don't mind if you shove an umbrella up my ass, but when you open it, you've gone too far.
Did you actually?
I did. And he never, ever liked me after that.
Now, looking at the stories of what ultimately happened to him, do you think that, the way he treated women is sort of similar to the way he treated women on his network? He abused. He sexually abused, and some people said, I can't remember exactly what the allegations went as far as rape, but it was pretty much, if not rape, rapey.
Well, that wasn't my experience with him, but I'm not
talking about him making a move on you. I'm saying that do you think he just kind of hated women?
I don't know. I think that with men who are sexual predators or misogynists, when they meet a woman, you're put to some kind of a test. And you're either going to pass or fail. And I think I probably consistently failed the test. I was not the type of person that they could either intimidate or try and manipulate. I think that predators know how to screen you. They kind of talked about that even with Michael Jackson, that, they do something and they see how you react. Mm-hmm. And if you react in a way that allows them to move in, then they do. And if you react in a way where, I never projected a sexual vibe.
Let me just be clear about this when we're talking about Moonves. When you say that Moonves tested people, do you feel like he
I didn't say
them
he
for being...
tested people. I said I think that when predators or misogynists,
Yeah.
you know, are vis-a-vis with a woman, they may do something to see if this is someone that's going to ignite their need to dominate or control.
Let me just, I might be being a little obtuse. So do you feel like when you were talking to Les Moonves, he knew that you weren't somebody he could run over from a business perspective, or he knew that you were never going to be somebody who was either flirtatious or sexually available?
Definitely the latter.
Mm-hmm.
I never got that vibe from him. Either, anyway. But
You're probably too up on
I was such a like a Jewish girl from Queens who was with her high school sweetheart. Mm-hmm. I wasn't a single starlet that was, by the time he came into it, I was already married a long time and an EP on the show, and, it was my show and everything like that. So, we did not have that relationship.
But let me ask you, well, you had said that, I don't know if this was his call.
But he did try and get me to do things business-wise that I probably uncommonly for women or anybody who with a president of a network to say no to. But I already said no to the network about the character being Italian. It was like, so by this point, I'm not going to start doing a commercial for Bill Cosby, who's taking my time slot. It's like...
The Nanny was, regardless of how it ended with CBS, it was a huge financial boon for you, whether or not you made the Friends money. Ultimately... It made you a rich person, right? Even if it wasn't the show, has it been more lucrative since, with all these other countries making remakes? Is it just like sort of an annuity?
Look, I live large and have staff and have an apartment in New York.
Wow, that does sound large the way you mentioned that. I was ready to come here.
But I drive a car that's 19 years old.
Oh, you do?
And I love it. And I still love it.
Does it fly? Is it a flying car, though?
No. Though I wish I could fly.
My point in asking this is you don't need the money. You could retire should you want. Why bother? Why work?
Honestly, I think that this is going to be my last hurrah. It's too hard at this age. And I'm not as into it. Tell me
about the process. Has it been as fun as other shows?
It's just, it takes me away from here more than I want to be.
Yeah.
I'm in a dark soundstage all day.
Yeah.
I don't really love that anymore. I don't know. I like being in nature. I like being with my dog. But it does make my parents very happy. And that was my motivation for taking it.
Seriously?
Because they couldn't find... Their friends couldn't find me on TV Land, and everybody can find the Peacock.
TV Land was Happily Divorced on TV Land?
Yes.
Or was it, okay. So, you didn't take this thing for your parents, did you? Really? You took this when you look back on it, indebted? You feel like you took because
I think I did.
Really?
I wanted to make them happy. Yeah, I wanted to be on the network, and I didn't know
they're not happy enough.
I didn't know where I would sell. I want to give them a boost. I want to make them happy. It's very exciting for them. Like my mom, I talk to my parents every day. Sometimes
you're not
a few times.
You're not pulling my leg, correct? You're really? Are you honestly saying this?
I am, and Peter was excited about it too.
Peter, you want to make Peter happy? Your ex-husband?
Peter and I are the best of friends. We're almost still married, in many ways, most ways.
The guy did like having sex with women. Why? And you have like a friend. Why don't you guys just get married again? I
think he considers himself gay now.
So he can go out. You guys have like Thursday nights. You go out with your boyfriend. Is sex like that important?
Oh, well, honestly, we think that down the road when we're older, we probably will end up living either as neighbors or in the same house.
Has he found anybody yet?
No.
What's the deal?
I've seen him on TV. He's a very good-looking guy.
We both think that we're too attached to each other to make room for someone else.
Interesting.
I've had
Well, you did get
long-term
married.
relationships, yes. But even at the wedding, we had our Jewish gay minister friend say, do you, Shiva, take Fran and Peter to be your lawfully wedded spouse? And it was a joke, but there was a lot of truth in it, too.
Do you regret that?
You know, you heard of Must Love Dogs? Mine
sure.
is Must Love Peter.
That's hilarious. I don't know. You were married for 2 years to what's Shiva's last name? I couldn't figure out quite.
Ayadori.
Ayadori. Who is it true that you were introduced by Deepak Chopra, or was it at an event?
He was a speaker at a Deepak event.
Okay.
And I was very struck with him. Everything about him I found extremely intoxicating. Charismatic, brilliant, handsome.
I mean, what anybody, we know that you were married to him briefly. What anybody reads is the controversy. Can you clear it up? He seems to think that he invented email. The press seems to say that he's totally full of baloney when he says that. He's sued people. He did patent something called email. Did you believe that he invented email that we know?
Actually, yes. A lot of geniuses historically, when they're young, and particularly in boys who are 14, they do something amazing. They have a certain focus and drive, and they can put like 10,000 hours into an obsession. And he wrote 50 lines of code that created like the office mail system, the inbox, the outbox, CCing, all that stuff that was hard copies in an office. He put it together, and it won the Westinghouse Award, got him into MIT, and was given to the, the Smithsonian. All of his material, all of that stuff from childhood.
But if you go online, I mean, it's like, I don't know if you consider this kind of, I hate the term fake news, but people have kind of like disputed over and over that it was, in fact, like this guy died recently, Raymond Tomlinson, and they...
But he just did the @ sign. He didn't really come up with the code that Shiva did. And you know what? It's a very political thing.
Is it?
He's a dark-skinned Indian.
Oh, interesting.
And that's really a white boy's game. Have you noticed?
So interesting.
Have you noticed who the leaders are?
That is so...
And it's very locked. You will see ethnic minorities in sub-level positions in Silicon Valley or whatever, but they're not the muscle men who are leading the thing. And, it's... And there's also a lot, let's not forget, there's also that military, industrial, educational triangle. And he's a little bit of a radical. And that's not really a space for radicals.
Do you regret it? I mean, did you change your mind?
I have absolutely no regret about my association with him. It wasn't a great marriage. It was 1 year of bliss, 1 year of agony and ecstasy, and 1 year of agony. And yet, I learned so much from him and so much about myself because of him that it changed my life exponentially. I have nothing but gratitude in my heart, and I wish him well. We're not friends.
You in touch or no? Did it end up?
I'm in touch with his sister.
Yeah.
I'm not in touch with him, and that's his choice.
You do not seem like one of these insulated kind of celebrity types, so sometimes you have to tiptoe around stuff. But the reviews on Indebted were not particularly great, and the ratings have not been particularly great. People have noted how great you are, how great it is.
Well, it keeps getting better. I mean, we're holding 100% of Will and Grace, and I don't think they haven't had that.
I don't know if you've noticed this. I mean, we watched the show. I watched everything that's been available. I think actually the show has improved.
That's what a first season is. And we didn't even, it's only 13 episodes. It's not even like we got a 22 pickup.
Yeah.
So in 13 episodes, and you know what? I'm not a writer-producer on it. I would have done things differently. It's
Like
been
what?
a little bit of a frustration for me. I don't know. I would have grounded it more.
What's that mean? I don't. What's grounded?
Two people that lose all their money and have to move in with their kids. There's a lot of stories to tell about that. And we don't really deal with it very much.
What would the story be? I mean, we've had like an Uber driver. It's just, this just feel like there's a lot of, it's kind of, is it because it seems sort of static? Like things are just.
No, I think that I have to say, the producers are very respectful of my experience and my talent. They hear me out. They don't always do what I suggest, but sometimes they do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they absolutely do. One time I called them down and I said, this needs a page 1 rewrite. This is not my character. I cannot.
What was it? What was the?
It was mean-spirited.
She was doing something. The character.
My character.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was being really mean to my daughter-in-law. I said, my fans don't want to see me play this, and I don't want to do it. That's not what I signed up for. It's just all wrong.
And what do you think that they say in the writers' room when this happens?
Because I think before I came into it, they had Everybody Loved Raymond in mind, and they had that mother-in-law in mind. And that relationship.
Well, Dan Levy, the creator, has said that he was not written as sexy as you. I mean, there's a lot of, there's cleavage. You're a very sexy older lady in this. And he says that this is a Fran.
Yeah, you can't not make it a Fran. They should have called me Fran. It's like, but in a way, it's, they made the choice. Do we go with Fran and then it becomes a whole nother animal? Or do we go with a character actress like the one that was in Everybody Loves Raymond and write the show?
Well, that's a much older actor. Didn't he write it with Fran Drescher type? Hasn't he said?
Yeah, but I don't think that when he said that, he was actually picturing her being like me.
Physically,
looking like me, yes.
So he was not thinking of an attractive.
No, he was thinking of his mother.
Yeah.
His mother.
Have you met her?
Yes. And, they're sweet people, his parents, and they're probably my age, but they're not, I think that Stephen and I are, Stephen Weber, a very unusual, sexy portrayal of the parents in the sitcom.
So are you and Stephen saying, do you share this with him? Do you feel like everybody's kind of on the same page that this is not kind of going where it could?
I never said that. I think it's moving in a better direction.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a first season is about, finding the show.
It's virtually impossible to overstate just how important health is to Fran. And I can actually identify with this because there's been, as you'll see, a lot of psychodrama over issues of health, especially after a few cocktails in the Goldman household. But it's really understandable why Fran is so obsessed with health. Back in 1998, Fran was a big TV star, but she wasn't feeling well. She was experiencing bleeding when she wasn't supposed to be bleeding and really painful cramps. And over a course of 2 years, 8 different doctors told her that she was just fine, that what she was actually experiencing was just early onset menopause in her 30s. What she was actually feeling and what she was experiencing was cancer growing within her. She had uterine cancer, and it wasn't until 2 years after she first started seeing doctors in 2000 that it was discovered, and she was operated on and treated.
Amazing somebody who's a star on network television can't find out what the heck is wrong with them, which is what happened to you, right?
Well, I thought that my situation was unique, but when I went on my book tour and started talking to people, I realized that misdiagnosis and mistreatment is extremely common in this country because doctors are bludgeoned by big business health insurance to go the least expensive route of diagnostic testing. Most doctors subscribe to the philosophy, if you hear hooves galloping, don't look for zebra, it's probably a horse. And if you happen to be a zebra, as I was, you're going to slip through the cracks because most women that get uterine cancer are not young and thin, but 1 out of 4 women are. So that's 25%. But when Dr. Number 1 said I was too young for an endometrial biopsy, which was a simple in-office very fast but somewhat painful test. I didn't ask her, well, what would that prove or disprove? I was kind of just happy to be too young for anything. But it was doctor number 8, 2 years later, that had me still thinking I was perimenopausal on an HRT, a hormone replacement therapy, that exacerbated my symptoms. I started bleeding 24/7 because it had estrogen in it, which was like taking poison. And she said, okay, it's probably just the wrong combination of hormones, but just to be safe, let's do an endometrial biopsy. While she's doing the biopsy, she's still so convinced that I have like 5 minutes of fertility left. She said, if you and your boyfriend want to ever have a biological child, you must go to this fertility doctor in the building and at least freeze an embryo. But
Did you find that insensitive? I mean, I know it's not polite anymore to ask. I've learned from actually making the mistake that to ask a woman who doesn't have children if they ever considered having children, it's not something I would have ever asked. But you did say recently that you had some regrets.
Excuse me.
No.
Well, that guy I was with ignited in a desire that I had never felt before. But I was already done with the show.
We're talking about the guy that you write about in the book.
Yes.
The codename John.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then, I had finally felt like now I understand what other women feel when they want to have some man's baby. But
did you resent that question, though, from the doctor? Did you think that was kind of out of bounds to say you might want to freeze your eggs?
No, my point was that they were so headstrong on seeing one thing that even when she was doing the test that would diagnose me with uterine cancer, she just was going through the motions of that. She was still headstrong on the track that I was perimenopausal.
Yes.
So it was 3 days later she called to say, I'm very surprised.
Do I've read about these tribulations. I mean, do you blame the doctors? Do you think that they didn't have an open mind, or do you think it's just really hard to diagnose these diseases?
No, I blame the doctor. I blame the medical community.
Yeah.
I think that, there is too much misdiagnosis and mistreatment. And as an unfortunate consequence of that late-stage cancer diagnosis, I was lucky. My cancer was a slow-growing cancer. And even after 2 years and 8 doctors, I was still in stage 1. But that became the cornerstone of Cancer Schmanza, my foundation and nonprofit. Catching on arrival, 95% survival. Why isn't everybody getting diagnosed in stage 1 when it's most curable?
Now, let me talk about Cancer Schmancer to finish this up, because I was looking at, actually, you have events, you bring speakers in.
Yes.
My wife and I have kind of an act, which is, she was diagnosed with lupus many years ago and managed to
Reverse it?
Yeah, she's no longer, she's had blood. Asymptomatic. She has blood tests. She doesn't test. And I have watched her order shit that I think is like crazy. She's, drank.
Healthy or unhealthy?
Healthy.
Okay.
Healthy.
Right.
Alternative health, like natural health.
Yeah.
Like drinking, what's the stuff that tasted? I've tasted it before. Clay. Like, for instance, there was a clay period. She is a very, very healthy person, and she's convinced that she reversed her disease. And I say, honey,
I believe her.
I am the cynical one. What are the numbers? Celery juice. What are you talking about? That's crazy. But you have.
But you would be mistaken.
You have embraced this world.
Because I'm not buying into the current sick care system that you're obviously brainwashed by.
Tell me about it. Because that's what she says.
Food is medicine.
That's what she says.
And medicine is food. And we live in highly toxic times. And I do a masterclass health summit. I curate some of the most progressive, radical, outside-of-the-box thinking doctors out there. And it's an all-day event that goes out live stream around the world. And I'm part of it. Mm-hmm. And then we cut it into an edu-series that once again gets put. This is all Cancer Schmanza, my nonprofit. And, what we drive home over and over again to people is how you live equals how you feel. And one of our programs is detox your home, because the home is the most toxic place we spend the most time in, and ironically have the most control over. So what are you putting in your mouth? All the food you eat. If you're not organic, you're asking for trouble.
Let me just look. My wife said to me, if you ever got cancer, I would rush you to, let me see the name of
Gerson?
It's a clinic in Switzerland.
Oh.
And I have said to her, well, I think that you probably want me to die. It's one of these, it's a natural healing
I know
place.
exactly the place you're talking about. It used to be Thomas Rowe's Hospital. And
Yes.
He sold it, and now it's another.
I wrote it down.
It's another name, but yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
and I said
in
to her,
Mexico, there are places like that. That's why I thought maybe you meant Gerson.
No, but I mean, I
or
feel
maybe
like
you meant hope for cancer.
The narrative that we hear, you read the Steve Jobs book, and Steve Jobs neglected like Western medicine, and he went off and did his own thing. And people say, oh, if only he'd actually just gone to Dana, whatever, he would have been cured. And then you hear
Steve Jobs like.
All I'm saying is that
only for like months on end. He did not understand functional medicine.
Mm-hmm.
He did not appreciate the functionality of the body, and that the gut and is your immune system as well as your brain. And the approach of functional medicine is cancer is just the end stage of a long term of low-level inflammation. And you have to reduce your inflammation and bolster your immune system. You have to fortify it and turn it into like a superhero.
Yeah.
And that comes with heavy nutrient support and all kinds of things that, and eliminating things that are compromising your immune system, including the EMFs that we expose ourselves to.
Fran, let me ask you though. Okay, so have you had any recurrence of your cancer since your surgery in 2000?
No, thank God.
What's the first call if you found out, God forbid, and let's knock wood, that you were sick? Would your first call to be to a Western practitioner, or would you?
The thing that I would do with Western practitioners is take all the necessary tests, because that's covered by my insurance. So I would get an oncologist here. I would get all the necessary tests. Mm-hmm. I would listen to what their recommendations are, and then I would almost 100% go to one of these oncological alternative hospitals like Hope for Cancer in Mexico. I meet a lot of people that go traditional and get better, but it's a different approach. They're trying to kill the cancer. We're trying to build up the body to reverse it.
Yeah.
That's what the body is designed to do. If you end up with cancer cells in you that take hold, it's because you have profoundly neglected your immune system.
Yeah.
Look, I was a rape victim. I didn't deal with my pain at the time. I went through a very painful divorce. I abused myself with the overwork that I did. I carried all this burden. I was experiencing, probably a lot of inflammation without really acknowledging it, or still being on that treadmill of taking suppressants to suppress the symptoms, anti-inflammatories or whatever. And, it's almost poetic that I would end up with a gynecologic cancer because I was raped and didn't deal with my pain.
Do you actually think it literally that not dealing with your pain got you cancer, not dealing with the pain of that rape?
I think it's a trifecta. It's stress, it's exposure to toxins, and it's trauma.
See, I don't know what to think because I looked at some of the...
listen to your wife.
Okay, I looked at some of the speakers.
That's how you think, trust me.
Okay, no, I looked at some of the speakers and you Google them, and then the fourth thing is such and such quack. And I looked at and I was like, Dr. V. I'm like, who is this person? She cured herself of cancer with something called black salve. I don't know what black salve is, but she had breast cancer and she put a salve on herself and says that she cured herself.
And she changed her lifestyle radically.
Yeah.
And understood how to support her body with nutrients.
I Google things and I feel
Don't
Google things?
Well, it's...
Is there bullshit out there?
I'm just telling you, listen to your wife. Okay. That's all you need to know.
The road that I frequently go down and the road that is not socially acceptable now, if I go down the road, it seems like a lot of these same practitioners are saying that autism is caused by vaccinations. And for me...
Look, that
it is the drug companies that have a vested interest in having these, however, way too many vaccinations in kids, and they're making kids sick. And for me, just to even sort of entertain this...
I don't like the idea of giving a baby 40 vaccines in their first 2-3 years of life. That's just crazy. There are, that is driven by... this is just my opinion, but I think it is driven by big business pharmaceuticals. And again... are we born as human beings that we need a vaccine, or do we need to learn how to support our immune system? And do we need to understand what causation is and eliminate that? Nobody is looking at causation. That's like the equivalent of if you had an apple tree and all the apples suddenly were growing out kind of rotten, would you try and inject and cure each apple? No, it's ridiculous. You would look at the trunk of the tree. You would go into the roots of the tree. You would try and understand what is making this tree sick. Okay,
I understand that. But if I go into a pediatrician, what do you tell people? If somebody went into a pediatrician and they said, this is the schedule, this is what the government has suggested, these are all the guidelines, would you say no?
Right, yeah.
You would?
Yeah, because I don't
Not
trust.
doing.
I say, look, first of all, if you have available to you a completely organic product that doesn't have any kind of synthetic chemicals or toxic chemicals as part of its compound.
Vaccines? Yeah?
Yes. Then let's first begin there. That I don't think exists.
What do you, but
and then can we do it over 10 years or something? I don't know. But it's way too much.
People get very emotional about this.
It's a free country.
They say, you even, I think.
I got vaccines, but I think I had 4.
But you even wade into this a little bit, and they will say, we're not even going to have this conversation. Science is settled. It's all settled. We can't even have this conversation because it's been settled. And then people like my wife, for instance, say, no, it's not settled.
Yeah, please always listen to your wife.
My wife in particular, or just any wife?
No, your wife. No, because what you're telling me, she's spot on. And, we are one of the sickest nations in the free world. We are number 35 by the World Health Organization. And in a nation like this, don't you think that's a little pathetic?
Yeah. Lastly, I didn't want to start with this, but my condolences. I know you lost your puppy.
Yes, Samson. Oh, God.
And I know that he died unexpectally.
Yes.
Pomeranian?
He had a stroke. Yeah. And it was just so out of the blue. And I've been suffering. But one night in deep anxiety, in depths of despair, I prayed to God to please, please, please help me climb out of this pain. And I found myself looking on Pet Finder, and I found this dog. And she gave me a welcome that was less like a first meeting and more like long-lost friends reunion. And I'm going to get her.
Where did she find? Is she a rescue, or is she?
Yeah, she's a rescue. That's what's on.
Is she a Pomeranian related, or
no? She's a husky.
Do you think that it's possible that? Do you believe in reincarnation? Do you think it's possible that she is the soul of a pet that you've?
I was told by a friend of a friend who turns out to be a psychic, And she said, I have a feeling you need to get a dog right away and ask Samson to guide you. And I think Samson guided me to
Really?
this dog and was there with us when we met. Because the dog, I kneeled down, and the dog pushed me flat on my back and straddled me. And Samson used to do that.
Oh, well, and that.
And that
We don't know each other, Fran, but I love you so much. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
I
Thank
hope
you so
that
much
you bring
doing
your
this.
wife to our Cancer Schmancer Masterclass Health Summit.
There's a cruise, right? You do an annual
The
cruise.
cruise is in June. It's this June 22nd.
And it's out of New York, correct?
Yes, and that's also an evening. It's just a dinner cruise. We go to the Statue of Liberty and back. And then we have the best of Broadway and cabaret entertaining us. And then we have a organic dinner. And it's a very special evening in support of Cancer Schmancer.
I looked at I looked at the highlights and it looked like fun. It looked quite gay. There was some drag show. There was cabaret.
Yeah, well, it's usually around the same time as Pride Week.
Okay.
And I am a gay icon. So that's our fun front.
When did you find out you were a gay icon?
During the nanny, I kind of was told that I was a gay icon, and drag queens were starting to imitate me. And then when, Peter came out, I think that's when I was elevated
You were
to
a gay
Judy
icon
Garland status.
You were a gay icon at 15, apparently, unbeknownst to you.
I know, truly.
Well, thank you so much, Fran.
You're so welcome. This is fun.
Well, that's the episode. Thanks for listening. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and rate. High ratings only, please. The Originals was produced by myself, Andrew Goldman, as well as the incomparable Rob Heath. Special thanks on this episode go to Los Angeles Magazine editor-in-chief Mayor Rashawn, as well as all the incredible people on Team Fran, and that includes Jordan Planet and Susan Holland. The Originals, as always, is a highly replaceable production.